Good evening. The number of deaths from coronavirus in Scotland has fallen for the second week in a row. Figures published by the National Records of Scotland show that 415 deaths were recorded as being linked to the virus this past week, a drop of 110 on the previous week. It brings the total number of deaths in Scotland associated with COVID-19 to 3,213. The First Minister said there was a long way to go, but there were now signs of hope that lockdown restrictions could gradually be reduced. The official figures showed for the first time that those living in our most deprived communities were twice as likely to die from coronavirus than those living in more affluent areas. We'll have a special report on that shortly. But first, our health correspondent Lisa Summers looks at what today's figures might mean.
There continue to be positive stories in this bleak time. Like 70-year-old Brian Hurd. He spent 3 weeks on a ventilator in intensive care, but now he's home getting better every day. For the second week, deaths from coronavirus have fallen, solid indications that the virus is under control. But the First Minister says it's too early to relax, despite the signs of hope. Some of the most devastating stories of this crisis have come from care homes. 57% of all COVID deaths last week were in elderly residential care.
Fixing testing must become this government's overriding focus, and it's clear it hasn't been. It's also clear that the government could have been more transparent about what it was doing for care homes in the early days of the outbreak. Mistakes were made at the start, and they have led to the excess deaths we see today.
I said that mistakes would be made. I said I would make mistakes, the government would make mistakes. We are dealing with an unprecedented situation, and I am sure that is the case. On testing, we have dramatically increased our testing capacity. We are increasing the number of tests being done, but I think it's really important to understand. Right now, we're in a phase where testing is clinically driven.
A bit of dazzling red.
Oh, really?
In Dalmellington in East Ayrshire, this home has managed to remain coronavirus-free.
I'll miss you.
Oh, okay, I'm the same, Mum.
It's a similar picture for more than half of those in Scotland. But it is a fragile balance. As restrictions are lifted, the virus could again become more of a threat.
Hey Stuart, listen, your cheeky laugh.
Age Scotland has seen calls to its helpline treble during this crisis. They say there needs to be clarity for older people going forward.
Enforced lockdown, you could say it's a form of torture. And some old people, we know loneliness and isolation was a huge issue before COVID-19, and that is something we're really concerned about, the deep impact and the other health consequences this could have if older people have to remain in persistent lockdown.
There are growing calls on the government to lay out its next steps, and the First Minister promises more detail on that next week, and they'll consider a phased return to some NHS services that have had to be suspended. But for now, nothing changes. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.